Kim, welcome to Trucking Genius. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful day, and I'm sure it's a beautiful day in Canada as well. Why don't we start again? This is a very important topic to both of us, probably near and dear to your heart as well, focused on women in trucking. To begin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into trucking, and how that took you to the position where you are today?
Okay. So I started my career in trucking back in 1995. The time I was engaged to a trucker, and he was on the road a lot and came home and suggested I get my license. So I did. And so I went through school, obtained my license. I did a fantastic driver training program at that time. And then I did a few team runs, and then
With your husband?
with my fiance at the time. And so he then decided that he really didn't like being on the road and wanted to go back working local. He had another skilled trade at the time. And so I decided that, well, I kind of love this and I'm going to stay. So I ended up running single, and I feel like my dispatcher was my travel agent, and I got paid to travel and see North America, making little stops here and there to drop stuff off and pick it up. But I saw things that I would never have normally seen, and had the opportunity to go to so many places that I never would have been able to go to. It was an amazing experience.
Was that the attraction to the job? Was that the best part of the job for you?
The traveling, absolutely. I've always loved traveling, seeing different places and things like that. So, and trucking doesn't feel like a job, or at least it never really felt like a job. Like you're driving, you're not. The scenery's never the same. Your day is never the same. There's always something different going on. You're always meeting new people everywhere. And it was a really great time in my life. I loved it.
How did the single experience differ from your first experience as running as a team?
Well, there weren't very many women drivers back then. There's a lot more women drivers than what there is today.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. I'd say probably 85% of the time, the experiences were very positive. Some people would be like awestruck, like you drove that by yourself all the way from Canada. And it's like, I did. And, and then there's some guys where it's like, women don't belong in the truck. But I'd say, that was very rare to come across on the road.
In those circumstances, how did you deal with it? When somebody was pushing back or looking at you differently, did they say anything, comment? And did you just let that
Funny
sit?
enough, I found that 9 times out of 10, I didn't have to say anything because someone else on the CB would pipe up and have their say before I would even have to. So, that's what I mean. I didn't have a lot of negative experiences on the road as a woman driver.
And when did you decide to come off the road, and why did you come off the road?
I came off the road. So I only worked for 2 companies, and I did 8 years. So I did 4 years over the road, and then I did 4 years auto parts. So that was just into Michigan every day. And the company that I worked with was going from company drivers to owner operators. So the work slowly started disappearing. And so I was eventually laid off, which I knew was going to happen. And then my husband at the time was also in trucking, and he was working with a company called KAS Staffing. And he said, "Do you want to go into recruiting and come off the road?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a try. Not sure if I'm built for an office." But that was 20 years ago. So in November, I'll have been with KAS for 20 years.
And what's your current role with KAS, Kim?
I'm the executive vice president and general manager of all the operations, sales, and marketing.
And how many locations do you have in Canada?
We have 4 physical locations, but we service all of Ontario.
Got it. And you came in as a recruiter.
I came in as a branch manager, actually, and build out the branch with drivers. And so the branch that I started in my hometown, it was primarily a driver operation. So it was kind of an easy fit to roll into the operation. I'd also had office management background as well before I started driving. So it was a fairly easy transition.
How did the experience on the road translate to, quote unquote, the office job?
Credibility.
Really?
Yeah. It really, when a driver comes in and they don't expect you to understand their lingo or their challenges that they face on the road, being able to be relatable, and being able to talk the talk with them really led to the credibility and the faith in having people that can not only relate but completely understand because they've been there, they've done that.
So, shifting to the current topic of today, women in trucking, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen, how the industry has evolved from the time you were driving to today? Some of the trends, some things you'd like to see, or some things that you're currently seeing that'll make it more impactful to bring women into the industry?
Well, I think in the last probably 5 years, there's been a true focus on getting women into the industry. And there have been organizations such as Women in Trucking that really drive that agenda that there is no reason why a woman can't be behind the wheel. And in with those organizations driving those agendas and having the growth in memberships that they've had with a lot of large corporations, a lot of corporations now are pushing for hiring women in the industry, come join our fleet. And there's also in Canada, there have been some recent government programs in Ontario that have been announced for women only getting the funding to get their license through the government, and the government will pay for it.
So that's a government program, and it's a
Right.
recent program.
Right. So the government's even participating here in funding scholarships for women to get through the schooling and get out on the road.
So even though the we may not have those government programs in the U.S., it would fall to the individual carrier to promote those initiatives. Where in Canada, there's government initiatives. Very interesting. When you look at your role and how it's evolved in trucking, let's flip it. Why is the trucking industry and driving, is that an attractive career for a woman today? Why would a woman who is looking for a new beginning, a new job, first career, why would they turn to trucking? Why is it such an attractive career path?
Sorry, did you say a first career?
First career, second career. I know we've talked about this in the path too. What is your take on stage in your career path? Why is trucking a relevant opportunity for women?
I think it's a relevant opportunity. I think there's always been a relevant opportunity for women to be in trucking. It's just never been at the forefront to evolve. And I think a lot of that goes back to, gender and cultural norms. So, forever and a day, we were brought up that this is what, men do for a living. This is what women do for a living. So until that started to have a cultural change where, there's no reason that a man can't be a nurse and there's no reason why a woman can't be a plumber. Once that that cultural mindset started to change, and there was really a push on exposure in the schools in the last few years, opening up courses and not making them gender specific. I think that has really opened the doors to both women and men can do anything they want. I know in the schools, they're really starting to push skilled trades for women and bringing women into, not only trucking, but different facets of construction or other that, under normal circumstances have been deemed male professions. And it's the same for men. So I think that having that change of mindset plus the need and lack of capacity in the markets, people have been able to explore other options of things that they like to do. And it's outside of the norms that traditionally we see.
So you're in a position where you're managing a pool of drivers today, essentially a carrier for all intents and purposes. What should a carrier do to promote or bring in more women and give them an opportunity? How do we access that pool of resources? How do we bring, if you're a carrier, how do you go and attract women as drivers? Assuming that they're out there and they're available in the market, what would a carrier do to make their experience more attractive to come and work for you, for example?
I think carriers need to have more women in the operations and training levels, and that there have a set of female trainers available for these different companies. And it's not that a male trainer is not going to be a great mentor and teacher. I had a great mentor and teacher when I went through my driver training program. But I think that it's less intimidating for a woman to learn from a woman and be able to ask those questions that maybe they weren't as comfortable asking, and things along those lines. Another thing, too, I'm going to talk about women in trucking here in Canada, is that the culture of the driver is also changing. And we're seeing a lot more husband and wife teams going through school, getting their own truck and running together. So that's been another big open piece in the market, is wives joining their husbands on the road. You know, their husbands are out on the road, they've raised their children are going. So now they have the opportunity and the freedom to, second career, get out there, get on the road and, enjoy the freedom as well as make some really good money at it too.
So family's a big thing, and the trucking industry is not easy on the family dynamic in that you're out for a couple of days a week, you might be over the road. When you think about that from a woman's perspective, how should a carrier manage that family situation, if differently at all, but be aware of the demands from a family perspective on both a woman and a man, from a driver's perspective? How how should carriers consider the family obligations of drivers, specifically to women in this instance?
So I've often thought that perhaps a viable solution would be that when women are joining fleets and they acknowledge that they do have family obligations that they need to work around, right? What about partnering other women that are in the same predicament, we'll say, and having them essentially partner? So when one is on the road, the other's responsible for both childcare and vice versa. So kind of like a hand out, a hand up, and it's reciprocal. So, you're forming a bond. You have the camaraderie of already being part of the same fleet, corporation, club membership. And then, being able to go that one step further to have that added support system that's organized through the fleet, but managed at a personal level. Just one idea I have.
It's interesting. Do you think the carriers, the fleets are sophisticated enough or willing to put that in place? I mean, it seems like a great idea, but it seems like a lot of work. But to your point, if you can pull it off, there's stickiness there, right? If you can provide that service, retention is going to increase because you feel more part of a family or a community than just going up and showing up for a job.
Like, I think that if a fleet were to, let's say, I'm not saying they need to manage it, just put the resource in place where,
Make it
you know
available.
what, we have this reciprocal opportunity here. You go on and register, see what other drivers registered. You connect, you meet, your kids meet, see if it's going to all work out. But that one step further, that, yeah, and there's a time investment to get it all set up, but that time investment is so minimal for the ROI that you're going to get on that, because you're not only looking after that driver, but you're looking after their family. And to be able to say that, yeah, my company looks after me, but also looks after my kids, that that will keep people at a company more than a $2 an hour raise will.
Agreed. Do you see that? So you have the luxury of working with a number of different fleets and carriers in the different markets that you service. Do you see any other unique tactics that they're doing today to pull women in and retain them as drivers?
No,
And that's probably telling too, right? We're not.
I'm glad you're cutting and pasting this.
Yeah, we're not. We're not seeing anything in the market today,
Well, you know
but
what though?
it's such a
Like,
pool of opportunity.
Greg, like I see a lot of advertising going on in the market, right? Like, come drive with us. We want women drivers. We have women drivers driving for us. But to actually say that, okay, you know, you women drivers, this is what we are going to give you to come and be with us.
Yeah, there's very little of that. So anybody who does come up with something like that is going to be leading the market and differentiate themselves from other carriers. It'll be interesting. You're in Canada and see a lot of that market. I'm not as familiar with the US market. I don't look at the market through that lens. So wouldn't be searching out those opportunities. But to your point, I haven't seen any from the carriers that I've worked directly with either. So there's plenty of opportunity there.
No, and there's plenty of opportunities where, what, we hire women drivers, we want women drivers. Okay.
Good, thanks. What else you have for us?
Well, pretty
Um,
much, right?
Given your experience and your path, what would your advice or recommendation be to other young women looking for a new experience, a new career? What would that advice be?
I think that if you want a career where you have the freedom of managing your own time, managing your own schedule, seeing the most amazing parts of North America, as well as the most humbling parts of North America. If you want to see past your front door, it's the best way to do it, other than a flight attendant.
Yeah, that's true. But you're dealing with a lot of people as a flight attendant.
Right.
So, what are the biggest drawbacks of somebody coming into the industry from outside? So, this opportunity, this experience that you just laid out is there. What should it?
Drawbacks would be the biggest drawback in the industry is actually not come from trucking itself. It actually comes from the insurance companies. So the insurance companies dictate the age to which a fleet can hire and have a qualified driver, how much experience they have to have, what their abstract, their CVOR has to look like. And essentially in Canada, with those insurance restrictions, people graduate here at the age of 17. So there's a minimum 4-year to 8-year gap between leaving school and getting on and being able to qualify for your license. I think that what certain states are doing there's a pilot program with having 18-year-olds drive within the state is fantastic. I wish they would roll something like that out here, because the biggest detractor in the market is that it is a second career.
Right. So you can't get your license, go on the road out of high school today, or when you're 18 when you get your license.
Yeah.
So you have to go and work for a number of years to close that gap until you become eligible.
If you're not going to post-secondary education, you're going to go work at Amazon. You're going to go get your forklift certificate and work in a shipping department. And then, then what happens is that you're in with, you've got a great company, you get along with everybody, you've got a great work environment. So why are you going to leave?
Right. So
why are you going to put out the cost of $10,000 to go and obtain your license, then have to find a company that will take you on with no experience, put you through additional training? It's not easy.
Right. Yeah. It becomes a transitional career for sure. Is there any legislation in Canada today moving in that direction?
Well, there was, I'm sure everyone's familiar with an accident that happened in Saskatchewan a number of years back where a truck driver hit a bus carrying hockey players, of which half were killed. And the driver was a new driver, brand new driver, had his license for 2 weeks, and he was given a load that he should never have been given. He was distracted, had no additional training. So what came out of that was, it's called the MELT program, MELT, Mandatory Entry Level Training. So you can no longer just go and get your AZ license. It's an AZ license here in Canada. You can't go and get your AZ license without going through a school to receive the amount of in-class training as well as in-cab training before you can even go and obtain your license. It doesn't go far enough.
Right. So it's those insurance requirements on the driver and the carrier that make it not an easy career to get into. It's not, correct. Hey, go do a written test and you're ready to go, or go have a job interview and you're ready to go. There are steps and there are costs and there's timing involved. So you deal and you're recruiting drivers in those markets. Is there anything you can do from a recruiting perspective? Any differences, any changes, any job content changes, anything like that? Are there different platforms where you can go? Is Facebook a better platform to find women drivers? Because that's what we do. We're a staffing and recruiting company. How do you target that pool of candidates? Is it different than the male driver pool?
No, it's not any different, really. When a driver applies for a position, it's it's based on the criteria of, what's the position, what, where, when, how, who, the 5 W's and the H. And that's the same with women. I mean, they want to know that, what the run entails, where they're going, those sorts of things. Make sure that the equipment is good. They want to know that, it's going to be taken care of.
Do you want to talk about the women in trucking entity, the body, and how you see their role in the industry, things that they're working on, why it's important? Have you been to those
Yeah.
meetings? Do you want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
What I would like to see with women in trucking actually is more men attending. So when I was at Women in Trucking, there are a lot of great speakers and breakout events during the day that I think would be relevant for men in the industry to hear.
What is the mix of attendees at those conferences? Is it 80% women, 20% men?
I'm going to go 85-15.
Got it. And all the presenters is all the content presented and curated by women, or are there
Yes.
men speakers?
There's
the
very
topics-
rarely men speaking there.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily that I think that men need to go there to speak, but I think that they could go there to listen.
And learn.
Right.
There's context, there's perspective that would be important for them to hear, as with every other conference.
Right. But I think that, if, for most organizations, they're predominantly male managed. I don't think that they have the perspective to understand. Their company may speak towards it, but I think that when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, you need to be a part of the event just to listen.
Agreed. How?
But on the other hand, though, it is very much geared to just women. So like the evening event it's primarily about celebrating women in trucking, and they have like theme nights, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, there's guys there, absolutely. But I don't think that there's enough that attend the event. How many women work for your family's company?
Growing up?
Right.
Oh, it was 98% male, but my grandmother was the one who really ran the whole show. She was the only one. She answered the phone, she cooked the meals, she made sure everybody was where they needed to be. But the biggest one was she answered the phone. And at that point, that's how you took all the orders. So everything came through her, which posed a challenge as she aged and struggled with retention, memory, and things like that. But you managed through. But she was really ran the family and therefore ran the company. So she was one of many in the company, but the only woman and really the cornerstone of operations. So
that's
amazing. It may not have looked from the outside that there were any women in the company, but if you ask anybody involved, my grandmother was the one who was holding everything together. Yeah.
Right. You can talk to the man in charge or the woman that knows what's going on.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I'd never really thought about it, but when you look back on their roles and responsibilities, she wasn't in a truck. She didn't.
But and that's what though, back then though, Craig, like that was a traditional role. If when you have the small family organizations that a few trucks, smaller business, family owned, there's always a woman involved.
Yeah. Everything came through my grandmother's kitchen.
Right. women have
trucks.
always been a part of. Their traditional roles in trucking are changing.
Right. Right. Which is refreshing to see. It's, you know, if it has been a long time, it's been too long. But there has been a role. And I think, the work that you're doing in Women in Trucking, bringing it to the forefront and talking about it, I think is important. Because it is such an interesting industry with plenty of opportunity from a career perspective for every age and stage. So when the topic came in as an opportunity for an episode, I really didn't get it because I just see it every day and that it's not an issue. But from my perspective, it may be different. Looking through from a different lens, from your perspective, for example, or Camila's or Kim's or Kelly's, you may feel different. But from my perspective, I don't see a difference between a male driver and a female driver, or male roles in the industry compared to female roles. It's to me all is one. Maybe that's based on my family experience and growing up in a trucking company where my grandmother essentially ran the thing, but nobody knew it.
Right.
Yeah. So, what are your next steps, Kim, on this path of women in trucking, but also your career path?
My career path?
Yeah. What's next?
Do you know something I don't?
Politics? Not at all. No. Jeez. No. You're running Canada, so you just take state by state and work your way south.
Yeah. I'd love to expand out west.
Yeah. So your footprint today is primarily Upper
Ontario.
Canada, Ontario, and you want to go west as opposed to east
Correct.
for obvious reasons that you and I will never speak of. But there is plenty of opportunity in the west.
There is a lot of opportunity out west, more so than there is out east.
Yeah.
Obviously there's more freight coming out of Ontario going west than there is going east.
And we should qualify that, Kim, by letting everybody know that I'm from Eastern Canada.
Craig is from Eastern Canada, and it's a very small, beautiful community.
Right.
It's a very amazing province, and it is got Nova Scotia, Newfoundland are the best people in Canada.
Yeah. And we're more around tourism, service industry than
right.
other industries. So we get it. We get it. But there is plenty of opportunity west. So yeah, what does that look like? What does expansion into the west look like? How do we do it?
Well, I think that we look for opportunities with, current customers and
in this day and age, you don't need a physical branch out there. You can do it virtually and figure out how to do it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that was good.